Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Paid Search Podcast. My name is Jason Rothman. As always, I'm joined by the great Chris Schaefer. Chris, how's it going today?
Doing great, Jason. So nice to see that smile as always. Just
Good.
happy-go-lucky, Jason, and and smart, wisdom-packed, Jason as well. You, as our listeners know, sometimes episodes are written by me. Sometimes it's a collaboration. Sometimes it's you. You've got a great show for us
Oh,
today.
Chris, stop, just stop. You're too kind.
Just,
You're too humble.
just great.
This was a collaboration. I could
No,
not have come up with these notes without your input, without you kind of kicking off the ball with the
did
original
nothing.
Dynamic Ag Group episode a couple weeks ago. And so
Yeah.
first of all, we have to thank you before we even get to me. So
Okay. So humble too. Just a
yeah.
beautiful man in so many ways. Well,
No, Chris, I mean, oh, okay. Before we get into it, how's it going? You look good.
I have to know,
Yeah.
Jason, you have two small children,
Yeah.
so your Halloween stories should be much more interesting now. What were the cute little children this year? For those who don't know, we just did Halloween, and what did they dress as?
We don't celebrate that.
Oh my gosh.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, Chris. We had a great time. We were a Ghostbuster and a Marshmallow, the Marshmallow Man.
Were you
Um,
the Marshmallow
but
Man or
no, I am
no?
every day. Thank you.
I just
Thank you.
yeah,
I'm here
not
all
on
day.
Halloween.
Um, my one of my sons was no great time, Chris. The older one finally kind of got it this year. Understood what was going on. Um, Took him to the end of the evening to figure out that all the candy was actually for him, and then he started eating it and wanting
Oh,
more and more. And so I was
oh
having to
man.
figure out
Yeah,
how to handle that
how to
and
stop that?
let him down softly, letting him know, no, you can't have every piece of candy
Can't have
tonight.
all of it now. Oh man,
It's a good
that's
time.
good.
How was your Halloween?
It was fun. We went to we have to travel because we don't live in a neighborhood. Nobody trick or treats here, so we had to drive to the city and trick or treat. My littlest was a ghost, very cute. Basically, just a white sheet over her head with some holes,
Yeah.
and she was very cute, except she couldn't see, like, the ground because the way the sheet was cut and everything. So she constantly fell. So, like, we are constantly just picking her up over and over again. And my oldest, who's 11, she was one of those blow up. Have you seen those blow up things? That has like its own little, like the Tyrannosaurus Rex. You can be a
Right. I
Tyrannosaurus Rex
saw a
where
lot
your
of
face.
dinosaurs last night. A
So
lot of
yeah, but
dinosaurs.
it wasn't that. It was an alien that had its arms around her and it was carrying her. So she had like fake legs sticking out of her body, but her legs were actually the aliens. And so when she's walking around, it looks like an alien has taken her hostages and is like taking her away. Big green alien, like as tall as me, and then her little 11-year-old body is like small in the costume. It was
Uh,
hilarious, very
did
funny.
you dress up?
Oh no, I'm a grown man.
Did your wife?
No,
Okay.
she does. She wore like a pumpkin shirt, but she will dress up sometimes.
Yeah, I think I recall some kind of Halloween picture from you from years ago.
Yeah, I wore a mask once, like a tiger mask when my kids were young, and I was gonna ruin the whole thing if I didn't wear my mask, and the kids were
Yeah.
gonna cry, so I had to wear it. But
No, it was a good Halloween. It was refreshing. And everybody's so nice. The whole neighborhood's so nice, and
yeah,
it was fun. So
yeah,
good start to the holiday season here, Chris. We've got a good episode today. Advanced discussion on dynamic search ads. So a couple weeks ago, we did an introductory discussion on dynamic search ads, kind of laying out what they are. I will get the number for everybody here as I look this up. So if you're wanting to get an introduction into dynamic search ads, you can look up episode 333. But on today's episode, we're going to be having an advanced discussion, and we'll go through the different targeting options. We'll go through how to block certain things. We'll go through one of the most interesting things inside of a Google Ads account, which is the dynamic search terms report, which is different than the regular search
yeah.
terms report. And then we'll actually go through some real data on a couple dynamic search ad groups and some lessons learned. So we're excited to give this all to you. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube. And we also have the first 100 episodes available at our website, paidsearchpodcast.com. And Chris, you're going to give us a message from Optio, and then we're going to get into the episode.
Yeah. I want to tell you guys about the smarter way to manage Google Ads with Optio. Optio, that's optio.com/PSP. That is a special URL that you can go to and get an extended free trial of this amazing tool. This tool gives you smart recommendations that improve your Google Ads performance. You can spend less time digging through all these metrics that can really get convoluted. You know, you spend more time doing actual meaningful work that drives conversions for your account, for your clients' accounts. So whether you own your account yourself and you're your own manager, or you're managing it for multiple clients, this tool is designed for large and small scaling. And the great thing is that you can try it for 8 weeks for free, 2-month free trial. That's twice as long as you'll get anywhere else. And it's totally worth trying out, because right now I have the inside track from them. They're going to be launching some new stuff out there. We have a special episode coming up about it to kind of announce part of it. You're going to want to hear about these amazing things, and you can try it. If you sign up now, you'll be able to use those new features that are coming out with your free trial, which is a special opportunity there to get more for the same price. No additional fees, nothing. An amazing package. That's why we've kept them as a sponsor for so long. Amazing software. Highly recommend it. Optio.com/PSP.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. So let's get into the targeting options of dynamic search ads. Dynamic search ads, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, but like what you feed it, whether it's your targeting URL or URLs or your category, which we'll talk about in a second, but what you feed it, how you choose your targeting option, is extremely important, because that's going to dictate your final URL, the page people land on when they click on your ad, the ad headlines that show in your ad, and then the search terms, the searches that you show up on. So correct me if I'm wrong, but aren't all three of those things determined by the URL or category you choose to target?
Yeah.
So it's like really important.
Yes. Yeah. And it is the entirety of how the whole system's going to work, from the dynamic aspect to the final URL that it uses. Yes.
Yeah. So this is where you want to give, I would say, your most thought, besides the settings, location, and schedule and all that. This is where you need to give your most thought when you're creating a dynamic search ad group. And so let's go through your three options. The first two options are based on URLs that you punch in there.
Yeah.
All web pages, it's pretty straightforward. All pages on your website, or specific web pages, specific pages that you add to this ad group. And if you want to do multiple, like punch in 2 or more URLs that show up in this dynamic ad group, you can. So those are the kind of, I would say, historical way that you can do targeting with dynamic search ads. But there's this new, I think it's relatively new, this new option called categories. And what categories do is they take, if they exist on your site, more than one page, several pages that match a specific theme for the same kind of targeting goal. And instead of going through there and saying, like if you're a moving company saying, hey, we have our long distance moving service page, we also have a page that talks about the pricing for our long distance moves, and then we have like 5 blog articles that are about long distance. You don't have to go look for all those. You can see what Google says about your website when they look at these categories, and they might have a category for long distance moving. And then you can just choose that one. So Chris, how do you feel about that category option?
The category, I think, is what bugs me is sometimes, Jason, you know very well, some people have bad websites, and some people have almost zero ad copy. They'll just have pictures. You know, I know a lot of e-commerce clients that I work with just have pictures of the product. They'll just have one shopping
Yeah,
page.
zero text copy on the site.
Yeah, just like a price
Or very
and then a
little, yeah.
clickable image, and that's it. So there are absolutely instances when this works horribly for categories, because Google can't figure out what it is you're actually selling. The content's not there. It can't really read it very well. It's going to be very poor in that instance. So sometimes specific web pages might work better. So it's going to be kind of dependent upon how well you've optimized your site with content and how much the bot can read that.
And the bot reads
works, it's
text.
amazing.
The bot reads
Yes, thank you.
text, and maybe it reads alt text on images, but primarily you want to think about it with text.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's a rich get richer situation, because the rich in this metaphor have great websites, fully built out, fully organized, and have a great flow to them with great detailed service pages and blog articles and on and on. If you have that, and if you present Google that inside of your dynamic ad group, they will come up with some pretty cool and detailed categories. And it all, to me, Chris, comes down to a confidence level. If you're confident in your website and how organized it is, then you should be confident in Google's categories that they've come up with. If you're not confident in the website, then I would be hesitant to use categories, because the machine is very powerful, but sometimes it's not very smart. And it might not do the best job of creating categories for you if you don't have a great site. But yeah, go ahead, Chris.
This is a very specific tip, and anyone who knows about this will recognize the value of it. So I don't want to go too much detail about why this happens or how to do it. But basically, if you are building a new ad group and you're adding new keywords and you've written an ad and you hit that blue plus button to add new keywords to that ad group, and a whole bunch of really bad keywords populate into that blank ad group that you've created, because it looks at the final URL of that ad that is in that current ad group, and it populates a bunch of things that are just not relevant, completely opposite of what you're looking for or off topic. That's a good indication that Google's reading your site very poorly. Not because Google's bad at it, because you're not giving it the information it needs to make that decision. So if you click view relevant keywords based on this URL, and you punch in your URL and it's a bunch of junk that you don't do or don't sell, you're probably a victim of just not having the right content on your site.
Yeah, and another way to kind of get a good gauge here is if categories is going to be a good fit for you. And I guess the benefits to categories are over individual URLs is that you don't have to go pick a bunch of URLs. You can just pick your category, so it's quicker, and then potentially a lot more volume because it's got more pages to work with. Now, Chris, I put some examples here in for you to look at. When you are on the category screen of choosing your dynamic ad group categories for your targeting, there's two columns there. There's the preview column and the search volume column. The search volume column is very cool. It gives you numbers, I guess a predicted amount of search volume. But to me, it's more of a relevancy thing, Chris. Like when I'm looking at the different categories, I'm looking for the differences between the search volumes in those categories to kind of understand which one's going to be a higher volume search category and which one's going to be a lower volume. So that's what search volume can do for you. They've got recommended bids in there, which we're looking at one here. It seems pretty accurate. They have recommended bids on some when they're able to come up with them, which is great. And then if you hover over or click on I'll clarify that. When you hover over the preview image in the preview column, this little icon up above there, Chris, you can see these previews, and they'll give you a preview of the landing page that they're going to send traffic to. They'll give you a preview of the search term that will trigger your ad, and they'll give you a preview actually of how your ad looks with the headlines. Chris, you see some previews here, pretty spot on in terms of the searches that you can show up on, pretty spot on in terms of the ad headlines that they've created and the pages that they've chosen for these categories are correct as well. This is impressive.
Yeah.
And if I saw something like this, where you look at all three of those topics, search terms that your ad could show up on, landing page that they're going to use in that category or one of the landing pages, and an example of how your ad would look with that category. If I saw something like this where all three made sense to me, I'd have confidence in choosing the category as opposed to just a URL target. That said, the website we're looking at, Chris, is amazing in terms of how built out
Okay.
it is. And
Yep.
it's very organized. It's very easy for a computer to figure out. There's a homepage, there's category service pages,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
subservice pages. And
Yeah.
it's easy for humans and easy for computers. So looking at all this data in front of you, even though it's very automated, even though it's very fast to set this up, are you impressed with what Google's able to do in a dynamic ad group based when it has a good website to work with?
Yeah. I mean, there is I could very easily punch in a different website and show you results from a different website that is not well built
Yeah.
and would show it would. I mean, it's going to bring junk in from the site. I mean, if the headlines and all the metadata and all the content is very poorly written, it's just very generic, it's going to spit junk out. But when you have good optimized site, basically the optimization is basically an SEO level kind of optimization. Strong headlines, geographic references, call to action, trust building factors
And
on your
all
site.
based on a good structure of the site, which is good for SEO.
Right. And if that's there, the tool does a great job. Absolutely. I mean, the example we're looking at here has geographic reference on it. It has, like a confidence boost tagline in it. I know it didn't create that itself. It pulled that from the site. So if the site works, then this tool is very successful at winning a great automated ad copy.
Let's talk about one of the categories people might see in there. You got these SEO agencies, they're going to do it, but then they're going to see landing pages from your standard ad groups. What does that mean? And that's one of the categories you'll see in there. And one of the categories you'll see is landing pages from your standard ad groups. And what that does is Google basically looks at all the landing pages that you're using in your account with regular campaigns that are active right now, and it creates a dynamic targeting category based on everything you're running. So this, to me, Chris, is perfect if you're dealing with low search volume, if you feel like you don't know what keywords to target and you can't find more good keywords. Throw on a dynamic search ad group, probably in its own campaign with its own budget. Put in the category landing pages from your standard ad groups, and basically make a duplicate of everything you've set up in your account and see what Google comes up with for search terms and landing pages to use and headlines, which we'll talk about in a minute, with probably less than 1 minute of work. How does that sound?
Yeah. I mean, we'll talk about final thoughts here at the end, so I'll hold back from that. But you're right. I agree. The amount of work involved, what Google does, yeah. I mean, it's
pretty cool.
It does as advertised. Yes, I agree.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And when we were getting into dynamic search ad groups a couple of weeks ago, one of the things Google mentioned is like this is a great complement to your existing search campaigns to fill in the gaps of keyword targeting that you should be targeting, maybe that you're not. And so it's just perfect. That category is perfect if you're dealing with low search volume and you kind of are a little bit lost with your keywords. Chris, let's talk about blocking, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll talk about some results and some lessons, and very importantly, the search terms report, the dynamic search terms report, which is different than the regular search terms report. Chris, why don't you walk us through basically your two options to block traffic when you're running a dynamic search ad group?
So the first one is something that you need to understand the full implication of how it works. But the first option is a negative URL. Okay, so negative URL means Google's not going to take into account that URL. If, for example, you use one of the targeting options that Jason gave earlier to use to target every site on the site, all pages. So if you
or a category,
or a category. So if you are allowing it blanket coverage of your site and not using specific specific page targeting, then you'll want to add negative URLs. So you say, well, what would be a negative URL? Are possibly the About Us page, possibly the Contact Us page, maybe some blogs, some old blogs, things like that. Just some sites that are not going to be something that you would want to pay money for someone to land on, because the opportunity for them to bounce is going to be too high. I mean, it's going to be an immediate bounce.
Like a lot of movers, they'll have stuff on their website about appliance moving, what item moving. They'll have pages based on that, not necessarily pages they want to spend advertising dollars against, because they don't bring in the the most profitable jobs compared to a normal moving job. So that's one example from that industry.
Yeah. The next one, if you want to do blocking on dynamic search ads, is something I'm more in favor of, because you can itemize specific searches. This would be negative keywords. The same negative keywords that you're used to using on search campaigns is going to happen here. You can choose a phrase match, a broad match, an exact match, a negative keyword to say if you never want to show up, if you're doing something like lawyer types of stuff, you could say pro bono. There's a good, you never want to show up for anybody doing pro bono searches. That would be a good negative keyword to add. There would be no equivalent for you to do that kind of thing using a negative URL. If you add a negative URL for your pro bono page, that does not mean you're not going to get pro bono searches. It just means that you're not going to use that page in its ad building and landing page and content generation engine. So if you want to block specific things and specifically what you want to block, negative keywords is where it's at. So those two options, I think that's, I have to say, if this was not here, the dynamic search ads would be a lot scarier to me, Jason. I would be.
Well, that's what I mean. That's one thing we'll talk about in the lessons learned section. It's like, that's what, I really love this kind of targeting in Google Ads, because it layers on a lot of things that we can't do, like show up on all these different searches and automatically create headlines. So it saves you time and widens your reach with some automation. At the same time, you have control, and a lot of control, which is a very, very cool thing. So it's kind of a best of both worlds situation. Chris, let's take a break. Let's after the break, let's get into something, a phrase we've never used on the show until now, 336 episodes in, dynamic search terms report. And we'll start there, then we'll go through some results and some lessons learned.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I want to remind you about our 2-month free trial that is offered only at optio.com/PSP. You ask why? Chris, why do you keep telling us about this? And I'll tell you, if you have not tried it, you are literally in the minority of people on this show, because Jason does consulting. Jason, I know you've heard people ask you about it. I do consulting. People ask me about it. We get emails. We get people calling us about it and asking about it. I know that people try it out. They hear it, and I am 100% truthful. They say, thank you, Chris, for telling us about Optio. It really does save us time. 100% truthful. I try and say, well, I didn't build it. And they say, I know you didn't build it, but you told us about it. And it has been an amazing time saver for us. You can join that amazing time-saving tool as well for 2 months free at optio.com/PSP.
Okay, Chris. So let's talk about the dynamic search terms report. When you look at a dynamic ad group, under your keywords in the middle gray column there on the left side, you'll see your normal search terms report. But if you go down to dynamic ad targets and you open up that section, you'll see search terms report. Yeah. And I'm calling it the dynamic search terms report because there's a couple more columns in here. You have your normal search terms column and all the normal data, like whether it's added or excluded. Of course, in this case, everything's going to be none because you don't have keywords. But you have clicks, impressions, click-through rate, conversions, all that data. But there's a couple extra columns that you get in the dynamic search terms report. And what are those, Chris?
Yeah, so you can see the headline that was dynamically generated, that showed along with the search. So just to pair things here, you get to see what the search term was that the person searched originally, and then what Google paired as an ad copy in the headline for that search.
Come on, Chris. That's better than responsive search ad data.
Yeah. That's pretty
good.
Right.
You're right. See you do not, what headlines lined up with what individual search term.
Dang,
it's pretty
that's
cool.
A good point. That's a good freaking point. Why don't we have this in the Why don't we have this in the normal search term?
You have to ask. You have to ask nicely.
We have to ask Google, can we please have a headline column in our search terms report, the normal search? There we go. It'll happen now. It'll happen.
Yeah.
Thanks. Appreciate it, boys. The next column you get is not quite as fancy, not quite as exciting, unless you're using, a whole bunch of pages. But the next thing is the landing page that people sent, or that Google decided to send people to. So you see the headlines, the search term, and the landing pages that they went to, now, which would be very important if you have, 15 pages. You would see a list of all these different pages and
or if you're doing categories as you're targeting. Because in this case, we're looking at a dynamic search ad group that I'm targeting one URL, and so the landing page is the same on everything. Yeah. But if you're doing like whole website, you can see what they're choosing to send people to and what they're creating ads based off the different URLs on your site, and then if you're doing categories, that's where I think it's like super important because you can see what URLs they've chosen for which search terms and categories. And then you can go in there and exclude those URLs if you don't like that for that category, or it might lead to some inspiration like, oh, wow, Google likes this random blog page I did or this random service page.
Very important.
Wow, I'm getting conversions from it. Maybe I should beef that up, or maybe that can give you some content and keyword ideas. Yeah. So that can be very cool as well.
Yeah, and right here, what we talked about earlier, you have an opportunity to do an exclusion here. You can take the search terms, look at the search terms, and add negative keywords based on the search terms that you see. Perfect. So you basically have the same amount of transparency that's happening on a normal search term campaign.
Yeah. So, Chris, let's get into some results here. I've run recently 2 dynamic ad groups. Both of them I'm using one static URL as a targeting. And I guess a few things stand out. My click-through rates on each of these ad groups, one is 6%, the other one's 5%. So pretty good.
That's good.
But of course, your bid will dictate that, or it will influence it if you're going to bid a lot or a little in your position and all that. But still, I was happy to see that. And then search terms. For the industry you and I are looking at, in the first ad group, 10 search terms that are visible on 21 clicks, so about a 50% ratio. And then on the other one, 5 out of 14 on kind of a sensitive topic. So these are lower than I would want. These are lower ratios than I would expect overall on search campaigns. But given the industry we're looking at, I find it to be pretty normal and acceptable. So the point is, no, you're not going to see all your search terms. You never do these days, but you'll still see probably a normal amount of them compared to a normal search campaign or a normal search ad group. And then very importantly, all the search terms that I could see, Chris, were relevant. And they led to both negative keyword ideas, because I saw some little parts of the search term I didn't like, and then also positive keyword ideas because I like some of these searches. So there's a lot of idea generation.
And I'll point out, I'm looking at the screenshots you have here. Long tail, fully contextual keywords. These aren't little
contextual,
these are not crappy little short dumb searches. These are fully contextual searches. There's a lot of context to it. You understand what the person's looking for. That is excellent.
And there's a lot more search terms. If you look at the search terms that have no clicks but also have impressions. Yeah. And so it can lead to a lot of, again, positive keyword and negative keyword idea generation. And you can see here one, Chris, like someone's doing a search for this topic in a different state than this company is located in. So I'm going to add that state as a negative. So it's not perfect right off the bat, but the point is, just like a normal search ad group, this is something you can refine and improve over time, which I think is very cool. So let's talk about some lessons learned here. One, we learned the lesson that if you want to, using that category called landing pages from your standard ad groups, you can just totally duplicate everything you have going on inside your Google Ads account as far as search campaigns go inside of one dynamic ad group. And if you're having problems with volume or you're having problems finding some keyword ideas, I think that's like a very powerful tip.
Yeah.
You've got categories, and I would say categories versus one URL for the targeting. Getting into this, I've chosen to do just one URL for the targeting, but I see the value of categories if they're accurate. So I'm going to start branching out into that more. Chris, comparing this to Performance Max, I got to say, I'm comparing it favorably from a person that's been doing search campaigns for years and years and years with a lot of control. Do you kind of see what I'm getting at?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's one major difference. So set aside the fact that you can actually see search terms, set aside the fact that you can actually control, what pages everything's going to, stuff like that. The big thing is you also get to see position metrics, search term impression share. You with manual bids, you can control your bids. There's a lot. There's only really two things that you take out of the equation that makes this so much easier. You don't pick keywords and you don't write ad copy. Everything else that is in a normal Google Ads campaign is there with this.
Campaign, yeah. And the other thing, like comparing this to Performance Max, is you get to control how much of this ad groups, and I always run dynamic in their own campaign. So this campaign's budget is applied to the search network versus the partners network for search versus display and YouTube and Maps. Maps is a little different because of the extension, but like my point is, if you're wanting to get the benefit of the machine and do a lot of automation, this is a way to do it while you're still focused on either both the search network and the partners network, or just the search network. Or if you want to open it up to display select, you can do that. But I like that you can kind of run a Performance Max search campaign, search only, if you will. They're very closely related in my mind, but this one to me is a little easier to set up and has more options for control. Once we get some of that with Performance Max, I'll kind of rank them the same at that point. But in terms of just like branching out from manual search, this one felt a lot closer to home.
Yeah, I agree.
And then the final lesson learned here, Chris, is just good quality traffic. It's a great way to get a lot of keyword ideas, a lot of negative keyword ideas. And to me, it's a no-brainer because it's very easy to do. And including this as one of the campaigns I make when I launch an account, to me seems like a no-brainer because you kind of have this, I don't know, like a little backup system going on in the background. And like, oh, did I get this keyword? Do I have that search term? And you can kind of run them at the same time, which if we want to, we can get even more advanced with this stuff in an upcoming episode about how they interplay with each other, the search campaign and the dynamic search ad group. But for now, we can leave it at that you can run them both the same. And what we've seen, at least when the website's good, is really good quality traffic.
Yeah. Overall, it's great to see. Thank you, Jason, for the deep dive into the dynamic search ads. And if you guys want to reach me, I'm at chrisschaefer.com, available for consulting or Google Ads management. And Jason?
Yeah, I'm at rothmanppc.com. We have links in the description. We thank you all very much for your time. You could be listening to any podcast, be watching any video on YouTube, but here you are with us, and we appreciate it very much. And we will see you next week here on the Paid Search Podcast.